This is the ONEXSUGAR 1. It is a crazy transforming handheld that features dual screens and a pretty powerful SoC. In fact, let's just jump straight into the specs of what you can get for this device. This features a very high-end Snapdragon G3 Gen 3 SoC. Naturally, it has those foldable gamepads with Hall sticks on there, but the big claim to fame that I think a lot of people are interested in are those dual OLED displays. Now, these displays are interesting specifically with the aspect ratio characteristics that they have. On the main display, it is effectively a 6-inch display with an aspect ratio of 18:9. The secondary display is 3.92 inches, almost 4 inches, with an aspect ratio of 8.7, and effectively the same DC dimming, 100% of the sRGB color gamut, and 450 nits of brightness. What's nice about that is that they are pretty much finely tuned and even. There's no large contrast difference between both of them. This review is going to comment on this device through the lens of those specs and how I see them and where this is useful. Now, I don't think that this particular device is for me, but I don't really think it's bad. In fact, I applaud OneX for basically making this crazy transformer handheld because innovation in this space is important. And while the first concept may not be perfect, it may be perfect for some individuals out there. Like there may be some of you that find this to be absolutely fantastic because maybe you don't want a clamshell dual screen device. In fact, you want a device that's effectively a reverse clamshell where it's inverse clamshell. I don't know what you'd call it. I mean, typically when you'd have a clamshell device, right, you would have something like this, right? So you'd have a device where it goes in turtle mode. Effectively, you can put this in a bag. You don't have to worry about it. Most everything is protected from the elements on the outside. You don't have to worry about the screen getting scratched up. You don't have to worry about anything getting caught. So this is fine. In this particular configuration, though, what we have is two displays that can get scratched up and protruding buttons and also a removable magnetic D-pad. All of that will be addressed in its own particular part of this review, and chapter links will be below. Now, having dual displays obviously offers a lot of benefits, but one of the interesting bits from this particular form factor is that effectively you can use that second screen as a kickstand for the device itself, which is, I don't know, I guess it's a bit odd, but it does point out some of the unique benefits for this particular arrangement of parts. So let's get straight into talking about where this device finds itself having a benefit for those two displays. And I think I'll work in reverse order here by kind of highlighting what is possible from this device with this particular form factor and what you can accomplish. Now, for the very high-end emulation that's possible with this particular chipset, we can tackle a lot of switch emulation. One particular caveat is that with the default drivers that are found on this, you're going to have a bad time. So what I am showing you is that I have downloaded other drivers that do work reasonably better. And I'm going to show it to you on screen right now. This is the particular driver that I hunted down after some time and tried out a bunch of different ones. But after trying a bunch of different ones, this is the one that I settled on that no longer offered graphical glitches or graphical anomalies. Everything kind of just rendered as you would expect it to. So this is the one that I'm giving 2 thumbs up on, even though from this particular point of view, not every game is going to be compatible with the latest Switch emulation that we find ourselves in. And because it's kind of a weird hodgepodge of different projects that are going on right now, it's not the best place for Switch emulation. For instance, some games like BioShock or BioShock Infinite, the Switch versions don't run. They just do not start for whatever reason. They will just sit at the screen. But there are many other games that are still high-end, like Red Dead Redemption, now runs fine with this driver set and everything renders correctly. Previously, there was lots of blue streaks all over the place, just not very nice to play. And now we're in a situation where while we're not getting perfectly a stable 30 FPS, we are seeing something that doesn't offer any particular graphical anomalies and is a pleasure to play. And when we take a look at the latest Legend of Zelda with Tears of the Kingdom, in the original driver set on there, all of the oozy black ichor it would offer other types of graphical anomalies. And now all of that is now fixed, and this game looks absolutely fantastic on these OLED displays. And for the most part, runs at 30 FPS with the shader compilation that will happen anytime that it happens whenever you're doing something new in the game. Outside of that initial instance of generating those shaders, it doesn't happen again once they're already compiled. Everything is pretty much smooth sailing afterwards. So that just gives you a good idea of where the top end of the emulation that is possible on this particular handheld. It is quite powerful. Everything that's below there, we pretty much have a ton of horsepower to do a lot of really cool stuff. Either you can really boost internal resolution like crazy, or you can tackle things that are harder on the CPU emulation side. And the CPUs that are on the G3 Gen 3 Snapdragon chipset are powerful indeed. So if we take a look at PlayStation 2 or GameCube emulation, what we're going to find is that it handles all of that just fine, and being able to boost internal resolution is no problem whatsoever. And then we can start looking into how the displays kind of play into this particular handheld and in various different ways where it is a benefit. You could ostensibly use those displays in various different manners. You could play it in the kind of typical candy bar style where it's just a single main screen that you're playing on, but you could also bring up the secondary screen, the smaller 8:9 screen, to have additional content on. Maybe you want to watch older videos on, or have that playing while you're playing a game on the bottom. Or you can do the inverse of that. You could put the PlayStation 2 or GameCube games that are 4:3 in nature fit inside of that 8.9 aspect ratio display just fine. And when you're looking at it through that lens, you have the bigger 6-inch display for guides and stuff, which I think is a little bit more of a nicer alternative. So you have lots of different ways that you can play around with moving these screens around in various different ways and running different content on them that are not strictly for emulating games that require dual screens. You can also do weirdo behavior by transforming controllers on the bottom end and have the 6-inch screen on the top. If you wanted to just hold it like sticks attached to a screen, you could also do it that way as well, even though I don't really recommend that. And we're going to touch more on that in a more detailed part of this review in its own section later on. And naturally, one of the main draws and benefits of having a dual screen handheld is playing DS and 3DS emulation. And in both of those instances, we have really cool solutions. For the Sugar One, the 1X group has created other software that runs on top that does a bunch of different features for how you want to run those displays. One of those modes is called Fusion Mode. And for Drastic emulation, Drastic really wasn't done as an emulator that ever really anticipated having dual displays. So what would happen is you're just kind of managing those displays side by side, top to bottom, off to the side. And when you do the fusion display, it effectively just matches them together, but draws them across both of the screens. The end result is that when you play Drastic, the DS emulator, they map to the screens perfectly using the fusion mode. So this is how you could easily get DS emulation running perfectly on both those screens with just the touch of a button. That is really cool. And what happens is, and when we're playing some DS games, not every DS game treated the secondary display as like a menu function or just showing you a map or showing you information while the other main screen of the game was actually running. In games like Contra, they actually use both those screens and use that verticality to display everything going on. And you would use both those screens to play the game across both screens. So now for games that, for retro handhelds that only have a single screen, you'd be swapping between those two, and it really wouldn't look all that great, or you'd be sacrificing a lot of screen space. With this particular solution, everything gets mapped really well, and you get the benefit of being able to play that perfectly. And for Contra, we're using that grappling hook to travel across both the screens. It all lines up really perfectly using that fusion button, which is just one button press away. So all of that works fantastic. One area where this is actually a bit of an issue, and it's not so much of an issue, it's kind of just a nitpick, and it's really just on the software side. On the DS, whenever you would use the bottom screen, which was a touchscreen, they would sometimes have different games that would use that for input for the game itself. You can still do that now and with no problem. There's nothing that needs to be done. All of that functionality works just fine, where you can use the bottom touchscreen to kind of do whatever you want for control and use the external buttons. The one problem that does come in is where they have this overlay functionality where you can map touch inputs to the corresponding buttons or analog sticks on the controllers themselves. This way, there were Android games that only had touch inputs for controls, but you could then translate those to actual physical buttons. Now, the problem that happens when we engage this mode, it effectively disables every control that is not mapped. And what I would like to happen, and this is just software, so hopefully they can just add this to the software, is I just wanted the right thumbstick to be the touch part of the controller, and every other button just corresponding to what it already was. And then in this mode, I could have used the right analog stick to fire in any direction I wanted because that would have been touching the touchpad input. And then I could use the left analog stick for moving. Unfortunately, when I was in this situation, every other input basically turned off. So I was not able to use that. So one thing that I would like is for One X to improve on this software specifically for DS and 3DS emulation, not so much just for touch-based Android games. We want to use it for other things where we have niche situations happening, and that would be a benefit. Ostensibly, you don't really need this. You could just do it how you would do it on a DS already. You would just touch the screen and use the controls, which already works, like I already said. But I just wanted to mention that because I feel like that's some of the software that would just round it out a little bit better and make it a bit nicer. And the other reason that you would want this handheld is obviously for 3DS emulation. And what's nicer about 3DS emulation, especially with Citra, is that it goes to other screens a lot easier. And in the settings menu, you can just customize the size and then just kind of click and drag how you want them to appear on those screens. It's really straightforward and does not necessarily need any particular software from One X to configure those screens. It's really just all in the Citra software itself. So setting that up is super easy. And then playing games like Donkey Kong Country or Mario Kart 7, all of these operate and work just as you would expect them to. In fact, we can actually push this a little bit further and do internal resolution bumps to make it look a lot nicer as well on this particular handheld. One particular area where this is a bit interesting is that for Luigi's Mansion Dark Moon, what I found was that there's a lot of stutters that happen or compilation that's happening in the background. And for brief periods of time, nothing will happen until we get over that hitch, and then the game will be kind of playable. So 3DS emulation seems to be a bit all over the place. There are a lot of games, a lot that play just fine, and you can do internal resolution bumps. But then there are another set of games that seem to lag pretty bad and don't offer that great of an experience. So I have tested many different games and didn't really find that many that were a problem. Luigi's Mansion was Dark Moon was really one of the outliers, but I haven't tested every game. I'm just kind of giving you this information just so you can kind of better prepare yourself. Because if you were looking to play this and be like, oh, it can tackle DS emulation, it can tackle 3DS emulation, know that with emulation, especially for 3DS emulation, DS is more of a solved problem in emulation, but for 3DS, it's still evolving and things are moving along. You could also try to use other 3DS emulators as well to also combat other games that may have compatibility issues. So that's pretty much where this handheld sits and what it's able to achieve and accomplish. It can do quite a lot given the chipset that it has. When we start talking about the controls themselves, this is where I think we can start to see some of the rough edges on the first concept of this very unique device, which I do applaud. The buttons themselves, because the controls can flip around, that means that the D-pad actually flips around as well. And what we have is a split D-pad. And what One X offers is this magnetic D-pad that you kind of just snap on to any of the other control pads as you're flipping it around. And really what it comes down to is that I don't really find this to be very good. On first blush, it's actually not bad, and I was surprised at how well it worked. But then when I was in the mix of things, especially when you're playing a game like Contra and you're moving in every eight-way direction, back and forth in diagonals all over the place, very quickly you feel that D-pad lifting off of the other end and start to swivel around. And in that particular area, you start to see the cracks of this particular implementation. Insofar as I don't even recommend using the magnetic D-pad, and I just use the split D-pad as it is. So how that particular whole thing kind of materializes is that it's not the best D-pad situation. Likewise, for the face buttons, I'm not really that big of a fan of them either. They're not terrible, but when you compare them to other handhelds that exist in the market today, these find themselves below other types of handhelds. If you're looking to get the best fidelity out of these buttons, I don't think you're going to find that here. With regard to the analog sticks, all of those work just fine. So if you wanted to use the analog sticks as your main input and not really use your D-pad or a D-pad input as a input source, you could lean entirely on the analog side of things and be mostly just fine. The part where it still falls apart a bit is in the triggers area. Now, this whole thing kind of is really wacky because when you flip the device around, it starts hiding buttons. And when you hide buttons, they have to repurpose buttons or knobs on other ends. For instance, there are effectively two power buttons and two volume rockers. When you're in the candy bar form factor, there is plus and minus keys for volume and then a power button. But when you flip those controllers around, they get covered up. And now you have a volume knob that doesn't really feel like an analog knob, like a potentiometer at all. It feels kind of digital in there. And then you also have a power button that's located on another end. And then when you just like take a look at all the device and all of like the cyberpunk-esque, Geiger-esque things that are happening on this device. On the back of the device, there's an LED that kind of indicates the power level of the battery. So it's basically right here. So right now, this is blue, meaning that it basically is like over 60% or over 50%. It would go like orange and red, I believe, and red is at 20% below. So you can just quickly look at this to understand how much battery you have without having to turn on the device or do anything to see what the battery's at, which is nice, but there's just a bunch of stuff going on there. And naturally, this is a prototype, right? When you flip it up, you actually see big bold letters, prototype, that's what this is. So all of the negative things that I possibly could say about this, I don't think the design is going to be changing all that much. But when it comes down to software and other things, maybe the buttons are going to change, maybe how things work are going to get smoothed out a bit. But as it stands right now, I am using a prototype that they have sent me, and all of my feelings about this stuff are with that in mind. The last bit of concerns that I have is with the longevity of the device itself. Now, I've only been playing this device for about 10 days now before this review was made. And as I was using it, I really didn't have any problem. There were no giant issues. But one thing that I noticed is that there is some play on those controllers themselves. They have a little wiggle. So when moving them around, do I worry about that hinge? Do I worry about what's going to happen with them as time goes on? A little bit, but they also magnetize and snap to whatever they are. So there is a thing that it effectively anchors them to the device. So I don't think that's going to be too much of a worry, but maybe something happens with where the magnet sits or whatever. I am not certain, but given the unique nature of it, I do not know that the 10 days that I put into this is enough time to really address all my concerns of any particular problems that will arise from just using the device in wear and tear. So that is a general concern that I have that I can't say will be bad. It's just something that I'm just mindful of right now that has not been an issue. So ultimately, that all comes down to, can I recommend this device? And at the price, it's $600 with what I'm looking at right now. And at that price for what you get, there's so many other devices that are on the market, and there are other dual screen devices or ones coming that I would probably offer that you should really consider what you want out of this device. It is a very expensive device. And if this ticks all the boxes for you, if you really want something that offers something that can be a clamshell, but then also transform into a dual screen device that is like a DS or a 3DS, that that is very interesting. And it's going to be one of the only devices that does it. Like there's nothing else that is going to offer that to you. But there are some negatives that come along with that clamshell wouldn't have. Clamshell will be able to just have triggers and just have buttons exactly where they need to be and where they will always be. And where this is constantly changing based on what you are. Because right now this is a D-pad, but when you do this, it's no longer a D-pad, and it's now face buttons. So the analog stick swaps and changes. So there's things like that to be mindful of when using this device and how all of that kind of shakes down. So that's really what it comes down to. Is I can't particularly recommend it for you. I can't say, yes, 100% get this thing. I can just say that it's really cool and neat, but it's really going to be for you to decide if this is exactly what you actually want from a device. And if it is, it has the power, what you're looking to get out of it. So that's really as best as I can offer you for review, is that you have to be really certain that this is exactly the device that you want. Thank you very much to my YouTube channel members, as well as my Patreon members. Your support really means the world to me, guys. I hope this video was informative. As always, guys, thank you for your time, and thanks for watching.